Hey everyone, it's Ken Puls here from excelguru.ca and skillwave.training. And in this session here, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you how to build a dynamic calendar for your data model. And I'm actually going to do this in two ways. We're going to start first with the manual way where we'll show you what's actually going on behind the scenes. And then I'm going to show you how we can do this the easy way using monkey tools. All right, so what is the goal that we're looking for here? Now, the goal is basically to build ourselves a dynamic calendar table on the fly for our data model. Why is this important? Well, because in an ideal world, your IT department serves you up your calendar table from a SQL database. But how many of you live in the ideal world? I've seen so many people that build a calendar table inside their Excel worksheet and then try and pull it into Power Pivot. The problem is when the data gets updated, they forget to update the calendar table and things blow up. It's just not good. But the good news is we have a way to actually make this happen so that it is dynamic and automatically refreshes to cover all of the dates inside our data model. So what do we need in order to do this? Well, the first thing we need to know is what is the starting date? What is the earliest date that occurs in any of our data? Likewise, we need to know the fiscal year end for the last date that occurs in our data. And if we have those two things, we can actually go and build a calendar table actually really easily once you know the trick. The question is, we don't want to hard code these dates, so where do we get them? Now, for me, a great source to go and pick up my starting date here is to go and actually pick it up from my sales table. Why? Well, because we're selling all the time, and there's a pretty good chance that I've got some kind of cutoff in my sales table that's going to start from where I'm tracking. What I want is the beginning of the fiscal year for the earliest date that occurs in that table. Now, as far as the ending date goes, I could pull it from the same table. That would work. But as it happens, I have a second fact table in my data model, and it is called budgets. And this is the one that I'm going to use in this case. Why? Well, because I always budget before sales happen. So the dates inside my budget are always going to be further into the future. So if I can pick up the end of the fiscal year for the last date in the budget table, I should have a good calendar that always expands to pick up the data from both individual tables. All right, so let's go and hop over to Excel and I'll show you exactly how we can go and build a calendar table for a model based like this. All right, let me show you what's going on in this file before we jump into actually solving the problem. So I have three individual tables here as source tables in my worksheet. And you can see that I've got a bunch of power queries on the right-hand side. I'm just going to go and double-click on sales, and we'll go and edit our power queries and just take a look at what they do. And they're not really super complicated here. If I start with sales, for example, raw data here, this actually connects to the original Excel table and brings it into Power Query and sets a data type on the date column. Staging sales just reads from the raw data sales query, and then sales itself reads from staging sales, sets a data type, and loads it to the data model. And this is the preferred way that I have for staging my queries up so that I've got a nice raw data query that looks at all the data I have available. My staging queries allow me to actually reshape and remove different things in order to get everything set up properly. And then my final data model queries basically just set the data types and load it in. So if you take a look at it in our query dependencies view, what you'll see is that we have our current workbook flows through a chain that looks like this. And this is the way that I generally set up all of my queries to have this kind of a staging layer set up. I'm going to go and hit close at this point in time. I'm going to close the Power Query window. And now what we'll do is we'll hop over to Power Pivot and go into Manage. And I'll just show you that we have our three tables showing up inside Power Pivot. And if I go to Diagram View, we have a nice little diagram that's been built up here. We're linking categories to our sales table via the category field. We're linking categories to budget via the category field, and you'll notice that I have a sales and a budget measure all set up here as well. You'll also notice that I have date fields in both my sales and budget tables. If I go and hit close, the final thing to know is that we have a nice little pivot table here that is based against the data model data. And if I go and take a look at this, you can see that we have our class on rows and we have our sales on values. So here's the trick though. What I really want to do is I want to actually be able to look at these things by moving class to columns. And what I really want is I want my date on rows. And the challenge is as soon as I do this, it gives me my 2 years of dates, but you'll notice that all of the values are the same and I've got a relationship between tables may be needed error. And this is because I've actually pulled the date from the budget table, and it cannot cross-filter the sales measure that is stored on the sales table. So what I need here is I need a specific calendar table to bridge between budgets and sales so the filtering will work. So let me just get rid of my date column here. We're going to take that off right now, and we're going to go and use Power Query to build an actual proper calendar table. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click outside of this and make the pivot table field list go away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating my start date for the earliest date in the data model. To do that, I'm going to go over to my staging sales here, which happens to have my date column and my category and amount, and I'm going to choose to right-click and reference it. This is going to open it up inside the Power Query editor with a pointer back to the staging sales table. Now, what am I going to do? Well, let me just rename this first by double-clicking on it here. I'm going to go and call this one start date. And the recipe for working with this is we're going to go right-click, remove other columns, right-click, remove duplicates. We're going to filter it down to date filters for is earliest. And at this point, we're down to a single date because we removed the duplicates. We've now filtered it to the earliest value. But the thing that we want to make sure of here is that we always ensure that this date is the first date of our fiscal year end. Now in this case, this is easy because my fiscal year end is a December 31st fiscal year end. So all I need to do is go to transform, date, year, and force this to be the start of the year. If you use a non-standard year end, the recipe is a little bit more complicated, but there is a recipe to do it. Now, the next step about this, very important, even though this appears to be a date, we force the data type on it to be a date, and then we right-click on the value itself, and we choose to drill down. And what we now have is we have a nice start date query showing us a little calendar icon on the left-hand side here, and you'll notice that it gives me 2018-0101, so January 1st, 2018. Perfect. This is a good part. I've got that starting period. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to hop over to Staging Budget. I'm going to go right-click on Staging Budget and choose to reference it. And again, I'm going to follow the same basic recipe here. So we're going to double-click on this one. We'll rename it to End Date. There we go. We're going to right-click on the date column, remove other columns. Right-click on the date column again, remove duplicates. And this time, we're going to filter for date filters is latest. Now, once again, we see here that I've got a December 31st, 2019 date, but we always want to trust but verify. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to transform, and I'm going to choose to say date, year, end of year. What this accomplishes is it deals with scenarios where somebody only uploads the budget for half the year. I still want to force this out to December 31st, 2019. So this way, I'm never going to run into an issue where that doesn't happen. Once again, I'm going to go and force this to be a date. I'm going to go right-click on this one and drill down. And now we've got our start date of January 1st, 2018 and our ending date of December 31st, 2019. Perfect. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to load both of these as connection-only queries. So here we go. We're going to go up to Home. We're going to go Close and Load, and we're going to hit the bottom half of that button, Close and Load to, and we're going to wait and then load this to Only Create Connection. And this is important because we don't really need these two values in the data model. These are just intermediary helpers in order to let us build our calendar table. All right, now, the next step is we need to go and build ourselves a blank query completely from scratch. We're going to go to Data, Get Data from Other Sources, and all the way down to the bottom where it gets no love is my favorite and most powerful query of all, the blank query. So we're going to go and grab this one, and it will take us back into Power Query and give us a new query called Query 1. So we're going to start by renaming this to Calendar. Beautiful. And I'm going to drag it up into my data model area. Even though this doesn't control the load destination, this is just about me keeping organized. And here is what we're going to do. We're going to type in equals, curly brace. There we go. I'm going to put in a little space for breathing room, and I'm going to type in int64.from. And what this does, it takes a value and converts it to a whole number. And what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take my start date. Remember, all dates are based on the number of days since January 1st, 1900. So we can take that starting date, convert it back into a number, and then turn it into a whole number equivalent this way. So that's the starting date. Now I need to get to the ending date. And what we're doing here is we're actually building what's called a list. For a list, in order to go from one to another value, we put in period, period. So it's kind of like Excel's colon, but it's lying down instead. We're then going to go, once again, int64.from, open up the parenthesis, and this time I'm going to go with the end date. I'm going to close my parenthesis and put another space in there just for good measure. It's totally optional. I just prefer it. I'm going to go to the end and press enter. And at this point, you get this beautiful looking list. And you go, oh man, what is that? Well, that is a list of all of the date serial numbers from the start date to the end date. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to grab it and convert it into a table. We'll just say, okay, you accept the defaults. And then we can rename this to call it date. And then, here's the magic moment, we set the data type to be a date. And boom, look at that. There is your calendar table. And honestly, if I want to link things together, this is actually all I need. But I'm going to do a little bit more here. We're going to go add column, date, year, and year. Beautiful. We're going to go back to our date column, select it. And we're going to go add column, month, month. That'll give us our month number. And we can go back to date again and say, let's go and add our month, name of month. There we go. Now we got nice big long month names. Not a big fan of these, so I'm going to grab this, transform, and I'm going to extract the first 3 characters. And there we go. Now we could obviously do more things, but at the end of the day, this is a perfectly fine calendar table for what I need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go home, close and load 2, and this one I'm going to load into the Power Pivot data model. We'll say okay, and we'll just wait for this one to load. We can see it spinning over here. There it goes. Oh, looks like something's happened, and now I've dropped into my pivot table, but if I take a look, I've got 730 rows loaded. Now the challenge is, of course, I need to link this into the other tables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Power Pivot, back to Manage. We're going to go back to Diagram View, and notice my calendar table is here. So now I can go and link this. I can link this one. I can right-click, hide this from Client Tools. Always recommend you hide the field on the many side of the relationship, the one with the star, okay? And there we go. Our calendar table is now linked into the model. There's only one small problem, is that right now my month names will sort in alphabetical order, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go to Data View, Calendar. I'm going to find my month name column, and I'm going to sort it by a different column. I'm going to sort it by the month number column. We'll say OK. We'll close this, let Excel sync to get its changes. And now if we go over to our brand new calendar table here, we can easily go and slide our month name in on rows, and boom, just like that, we've now got some nice dates. We've got no relationship maybe needed error. And in fact, if I were to go and pull budgets onto this, you'd see that it actually slices and dices the budgets perfectly well as well. So that's what it takes to build a dynamic calendar inside Power Query. Drill down into your start date, drill down into your end date, and make a list between the two, turn it into a table, format it as a date, and then start adding your individual columns. It works great. Follows a recipe every time. The only thing is, it does take a little bit of time to actually go through and do it. So the big question is there a faster way? Now, you gotta figure that I probably wouldn't have asked you that question if there wasn't a faster way. And indeed there is. So what I'd like to show you now is how much easier and faster it can be if you've got the right tools at your disposal. So we're gonna go and start this all over again, but we're gonna use my Monkey Tools add-in to build a dynamic calendar on the fly. And here's how it actually works. What you're gonna do is launch the Calendar Monkey. And this is a specific monkey that is dedicated to building robust dynamic calendars. You'll configure the calendar type and the year end and choose which columns you want to drive your starting and ending date. From there, you got a nice little checklist to choose which columns of date formats you'd like to include, and you also get to choose which tables you'd like to relate your calendar to. And then you click go, and most of it happens for you. Now I say most of it because there are a couple things that Monkey Tools cannot do, unfortunately. So what Monkey Tools can't do is that we can't hide the foreign key column, so the key on the many side of the relationship. There's unfortunately just no API for us to do so. We really wish there was. Likewise, we don't have the ability to add sorting hierarchies, so this work needs to be done manually. But the monkeys are pretty good at letting you know exactly what you need to do to finish things off. Now, Calendar Monkey uses the exact same recipe as what you just saw in order to create the calendar table. It just automates it for you. But it also has a few other pretty cool tricks up its sleeve. So why don't we go and take a look and see just how much easier this is to do with Monkey Tools. All right, we are back inside Excel. I've thrown away all the changes I made and reopened the file. So here we are in the original state. You'll notice there's no calendar table here, no start date and end date query. We got rid of all of those. And if I decide to go and hop into the data model, so go to Power Pivot and click Manage, we'll jump into Diagram View, and you can see that that table just does not exist at all. So I still have my original goal of grabbing my pivot table, changing class to put it on columns, and now I want a calendar table with my dates to go down the left-hand side. So I could definitely build it the manual way. That would work. But I'm feeling kind of lazy. I mean efficient. So I really want to go through and actually do this a little bit quicker. So this is what Monkey Tools is all about. This is an add-in that's available from my website that actually helps you increase your Power Query and Power Pivot game. If we go and click on Monkey Tools, you'll see the entire ribbon here, and the tools that I'm actually interested in this case are under the Query Monkeys menu, where we actually have a collection of different monkeys that do different things. And the entire purpose of all of these is to do two things. One, help you build better data models, and two, help you build better data models faster. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this one here called Calendar Monkey. We'll open this up, and what's going to happen is it's going to pop a new window up in front of our Excel instance. And the first choice that you get to make is, do you want a 12-month or a 445, 454, 544, or 13-month calendar? I'm going to go with the standard 12-month calendar. Now, one of the things that I had mentioned in the original demo is that there are different recipe patterns for working with different year ends. I happen to use a September 30th year end. So let's use a more complicated Power Query pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click my little drop down here and click on December. I'm going to go back to September 30th and grab September 30th. Now, here's the thing though. Notice I'd just say choose a valid year end. This is a December or a September 30th, 2022. My data only goes to 2019. That doesn't matter. All you need is a valid year end, and we actually back it up or move it forward for you. Okay, so that's kind of cool. You can rename your calendar here. We're going to obviously choose to load it to the data model, but the next piece that we're going to look at here is we're going to choose which column has the earliest possible date in our data model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, let's go and choose to base this on the staging sales table. And what you can see here is that Monkey Tools will actually go through and say, all right, no problem. We found that you've got a variety of different columns here, so we're going to pre-select the date column for you. I'm also going to choose to use the staging budget table. And again, I'm going to use the date column in this case. So there we go. So this looks good so far. My first configuration screen is set. What I'm now going to do is choose Next. And at this point, we pop up a list of columns that we think are going to be important to you. But not only do we do that, we also remember the changes that you make. So if you decide that you want specific columns in your table and you check the boxes next to these things, next time you open it up, we figure, hey, there's a good chance you're going to want to do that again. So we save those defaults for you. So here we go. This has got our fiscal year, quarter, and month. That's cool. We've got a regular calendar year and a month name. Those aren't going to change. We've got day of month, day of week, day name. Awesome. We can also pick up fiscal start end dates. And if you did happen to choose a 445 or variant calendar, you would find a period ID column set over here on the side. At this point, I'm going to choose Next. Now, if I had chosen to pull my earliest date and my latest date from the sales and the budgets table, these boxes would already be checked for me because we say, look, if you're going to pull it from that table, we're pretty sure you want it related there. But because I chose the staging table, it doesn't actually know that those things should be linked. So we don't actually force that on you. We let you choose these, but I'm going to actually set up the relationships to both of these right here. And basically, at this point, all I need to do is go and hit create. And what you can actually see happening here is that it is creating the queries for us. As a matter of fact, it's done. That's all it took. And it's actually created me a nice calendar table, you can see down the bottom here, of 1,096 rows. Now, why 1,096? Well, because we're actually spanning 3 years in this case, because I'm using a September 30th year end. Now, this didn't take very long to do. It's already set up. But there's a couple things that we need to actually check. And it's all about hiding the foreign key and setting up our sorting order. So I'm just going to hit close. And what I want to point out before we jump into the data model is that I can actually double click on calendar and open it up. And the entire logic for the query is here. So if you want to make modifications to it, or you want to learn how it worked or what got put together, all of that is in Power Query. There's no smoke and mirrors here. We're just building your Power Queries for you so that you don't have to, right? Nice and simple. So we're just going to close that up now, and we'll go and hop into the data model. You'll notice on Monkey Tools, the Manage Data Model tab is right in the middle here. You don't even need to flip to the Power Pivot tab at all. So there we go, Manage Data Model. We'll hop in here. We'll go look at Diagram View, and what you can see is the calendar table is already linked in via the date field. So that's all set up. As I say, the stuff that I want to do that I can't, unfortunately, I can't hide these for you automatically. Desperately wish I could. So I'm going to take care of that here. The other thing that we don't have an API for, we can't do, we need to rely on you, is to come back to the calendar table and take our month and do a sort by. And I'm going to choose to sort this by the month of fiscal year rather than just a regular month number. While I'm here, I'm also going to go and set up the other field for day. We'll sort our day short by our day of week. Again, I wish I could take care of that for you so you didn't have to be bothered with it, but unfortunately, I don't have access to be able to. So at this point, what I can do is I can now say close. I can come over to my pivot table. We'll just go and flip into the pivot table list here itself. I'm going to go to all to show all the tables, because here is my new calendar table. And now what I can do is I can go and say, let's throw our year on rows, and let's throw our month short underneath that. And what you can see now is that we've actually got something that's going October, November, December, because we have a September year end. Our first month is October, and it actually runs through beautifully in that way. So there you go. Nice and simple. Now, the other bonus of our calendar monkey is that we're not restricted to creating one calendar. So if you want to come back here and do this again, we can actually come back into Calendar Monkey, and we could say, hey, listen, I've decided that I want one more query or one more type of calendar inside my model as well. So as soon as it opens, here we go, you can see that we can easily go and also create a 445 calendar. All I need to do is choose the valid year end. Let's say that my year ended on December 25th. In this particular case, it's got a new name here. I can go and choose to start this from, say, staging sales again. I could go and choose to start this one again from staging budget. Click next. We get different column IDs here. We'll click next. Now, I unfortunately can't relate these automatically because I hid the columns, and we can't create relationships against hidden columns, so that's a bit of a shame. But at the end of the day, with that one small nuance of difference here, what I can do is I can now create a second calendar table, and it's done. And just like this, if I go back into my data model and go to Diagram View, you'll notice that here's calendar 445. Again, because these fields were hidden this time, it didn't create that relationship automatically, but I can certainly create it. And now I have a different kind of calendar, so I can report in a different way for different audiences. Just like that. Super fast and super easy. So where can you find these recipes that I mentioned and get access to these tools? Well, there turns out to be several locations here. So the first place that you may want to look is inside my book, Master Your Data for Excel and Power BI. This is the definitive book on using Power Query and contains every one of our calendar recipes in detail. You may also be interested in checking out our Power Query recipe cards collection, which has a collection of different recipes, including all of our calendar recipes, as well as many others. And these are just quick play cards in order to be able to go and bust it out on your data when you're looking for a resource to do a specific thing, with before and after pictures and the recipe in order to get the results. If you're interested in learning all of the science behind these things, we actually cover this in a couple of our different training courses at skillwave.training. And for all of these, you'll find the links down the bottom, the short links that will get you right to the right place. If you're interested in looking at the Monkey Tools software, you can find that at monkeytools.ca. And finally, if you'd like to connect with me, these are just 6 of the locations that you'll find me hanging out on the interweb. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this interesting and useful, and hopefully it gives you some tools and ideas to build some amazing calendar tables for your models.